everyone, welcome back to the React in-depth series. In this video, we're going to go over a bunch of exercises together to get more practice with the useRef hook in React together. In the previous video, we looked at the useRef hook, which was a way for us to make references in React so that we can have things that are kind of independent of rendering and a place to store stuff in our components. So we really should get a bunch more practice with this because it is a bit tricky to figure out when and where this is useful, hence these exercises together. So I have a bunch of exercises ready, a warm up and 3 exercises for us to go through. Hopefully it gives us some good practice. Let's take a look at them together. All right, so as with the previous exercise videos, I have all of this in the GitHub repo for the course. You can grab it from there, clone it down if you want locally, or you can just pause the video and kind of copy it down as you're going along with me if you like. It doesn't really matter, whichever is easier for you. Just note that in this particular set of exercises, I think it's the first exercise, there's a video file that you can see I have here on my left-hand side, monkey.mp4. You can really use any MP4 file you want. Feel free to grab one off your computer or a stock video website off the internet. But just be aware, if you do want to grab that, you can grab that from the GitHub repo, and I'll push that up there so you can grab it if you don't want to go searching. Okay, so to start, for the warm-up exercise, what I'd like you to do is create a new Vite React project. And you can reuse this Vite project throughout all these exercises, as with all the other exercise videos that we've done. Instead of creating a brand new one each time, it's just a bit easier. In this warm-up, I want you to create an input.jsx file with an input component that you export from this input file. Inside the input, I want you to return a text input element with a button below it that says focus, the focus text inside of it. Now I want you to find a way to use the useRef hook such that when you click on the button, the input element gets focused. And focus means kind of it just gets highlighted so you can start typing in it. If you haven't seen that before, definitely check out MDN on the input element like I have in the hint here, so you can get a sense of how that focus attribute and action works on the DOM input element. Once you have all that ready, go ahead and import that into your main file, replace the app with your input component and make sure it actually works, so that when you click on that focus button, the input field or DOM component should actually get highlighted and focused. So give that a shot and we'll go through it together. Okay, so I'm going to create a new Vite project here. So I'll just run npm create Vite at latest. And this is going to go and ask me for a name. I'll call this useRef exercises. I'm going to go with React. I'm going to go with JavaScript. And I'm going to change into that useRef exercises folder. I'll run npm install. And while that's installing, I'll just kind of get set up here. I'll open up the source folder. I'll switch back and forth to these exercises and pull in that monkey shortly. But let me just pull up main.jsx, things got jumped around here. I don't want this index.css in the main.jsx because I just want the default formatting for the CSS. So I'm just going to get rid of that. This is done here, so I'm going to clear that. I'm going to run npm run dev. It's going to kind of create my dev server at this URL. I'm just going to copy that, go over to Chrome, create a new tab, paste that in, press enter, and it should work. So that's great. That's our app. I'm going to zoom in a whole bunch and I'll open my terminal here, and that looks great. Okay, perfect. So that's all working nicely. Now we're going to create I'm going to create a folder to make it easier. So in my source folder, I'll just create a warm-up just so you can easily access this later. I'll push this up to the repo for all of you later too. Create a new file in here. I'll call it input.jsx. And I'll do I'll just close this now since we don't actually need it, just so I have more space. Function input, and I'm going to export default input. I hope you're getting tired of me typing this all the time. If you are, that's fantastic. That means that you're coding enough. Now, this input is going to return a button and a input element. So I'm going to return in here. I'll just do some fragment. And I'll say, first, I think it was the input that I want. And you know what? I'll just use the autocomplete here just so it's a bit easier. Input type text and self-closing there. And then I'll add a button as well in here. And the button will say, what did I say? I think I said focus. All right. Now, I know that the button is going to do some action, right? So I'm going to say an on click on this button, and it's going to do something. And I want that thing to be a focus event. So I can do handle click. I'm just going to go focus. I'll just change it up a little bit here just so we can see that you don't have to do the handle something, although it's kind of useful sometimes. I'll just say function focus. And in this function, I'm going to do something. Great. Okay, so we need to focus this input element from this button element. Now think about this for a second. This is actually more complicated than it seems, right? Because if we get the event from the button object, we can't really from the event object like this. If I put an event in here, like I can't really like do like e.focus because that's going to be the button, right? Or e.target.focus because I'm going to have the button element. I want access or handle to this DOM node for the input. So that's where really nicely a ref will come in, right? So let me do that. So I'm going to say import useRef from React. And I'm going to say const input ref is equal to, it doesn't matter what you call it, useRef. I'll start it off as null. Now, I want to show you something kind of interesting here. So what we could do, technically, if we wanted to not use the React way of doing this, we could do something like this. We could say document.querySelector, and I can say input, because it's the only one on the page, and I'll probably put this in a variable, input equals that, and I'll say input.focus. I could probably have just done that on one line without storing in a variable, but we'll just go with that, right? Now, I don't need this E. I'm not using it. And I'm not really using the ref right now, and we'll see that we will need it shortly. So let's see how this works, right? So if I click on the button, it's going to call focus, and it's going to grab this using the query selector, and then it's going to focus it. Let's see if that works. And I forgot to import it into my main.jsx, which is my last step here. So I'm going to import, what did I call it? Input from Warmup / input.jsx in my case, and I'll do input. Okay, and I'll switch back here, and there we go. So I have my input here. So notice that when I click on it, I think there is some styling going on here. I actually don't know where that's coming from. I think it's coming from app. So I'll comment that out. There we go. Okay, so let me just zoom in on this one a little bit so you can see a bit better. If I click on this, you can see that it gets focused, right? That's what that highlight is, and then I can start typing in there once it's focused. So I start typing out here, nothing's going to happen because I need to be focused on the input for it to be typing in there. Now, if I click focus, look at that. Like it actually works, right? That actually works. I click on focus and I actually get focus on that input. So this is kind of curious. So you're kind of probably thinking, okay, Nader, like this is all great and everything, but like, hey, we got it working. So this is good. We don't need useRef. And you'd be right? Like that's correct. However, when you're using React, I would encourage you to use the React specific ways to actually go about doing these things and the patterns that React gives you to actually deal with this stuff. It might not be immediately obvious why that's useful in this case because it's a pretty simple element that we're dealing with. But there are cases where having kind of the React way to do this stuff does make things a little bit easier. And frankly, for other developers, if they're used to working with React, it is a bit kind of tricky to kind of mix the DOM API with the React API if you're not used to seeing them both together. And it's just if you keep everything kind of concise and in the same like framework or pattern, it does tend to help a lot of the time. And there are some extra little benefits that we do get if we do use refs, which we'll see in the future examples. So I'm actually going to comment this part out and show that this still works fine. And there's nothing really wrong with doing that. But what I want to do is I want to put a ref on this input down here. And I'm going to say that that ref is going to be this input ref. And we saw in the useRef video that first we're going to get a current property that's going to refer to null. So if I console.log this out here on input ref, this is going to be, we're going to get current, well, actually, here we go. We're going to get current null. There we go. If I refresh, which is what we expect, right? Because that's what we set it to start. And only when the component mounts, then do we actually get our input ref. So let me log it in here, and we'll see that this is going to run after the component mounts because otherwise we wouldn't have the button in there. And if I now refresh this page, we see that it goes from being null to it being actually that actual live DOM node. So now what we can do is we can grab that current property, right? This current property, which is the actual DOM node, and focus it. So we can say input ref dot current, which is the DOM node, and then I can call dot focus on it. And I'll get rid of this console log because we don't need that anymore either. And now what React is doing is it's setting this ref to be this ref, and then on focus, we're going to use that reference which has been populated by React automatically, the ref.current, and we're going to call .focus on it, which works on an input element and actually focuses it just like we saw with the DOM API. So now if I reload this page and I click on focus here, there we go, right? You can see I click off, click back on, and it's actually focused and I can type in there. So that's pretty cool, right? These both work. If we were to kind of break this down, kind of what's happening with React is really this part is kind of this part here, the input ref, and then this ref right here. Except you can imagine that if we have many, many inputs on the page, we would have to make this selector a bit more specific, but this ref is always just going to latch specifically onto that exact element, which is pretty nice. And then this focus part is pretty much this line of code right here. So actually the lines of code, if you think about it, are about the same. It's just, the React way, as I mentioned, is probably correct way in the context of a React application. And as things get more complicated and you have to deal with different values on DOM nodes, it might be a bit tricky to brain switch and context switch back and forth between the different APIs. Cool. So that is the warm-up exercise. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's take a look at exercise 1 together. Okay, so for this one, this is where we have some fun. So we're going to be using a video file, and I'll just give you a couple hints on that really quick, but let's just go through instructions. I'd like you to create a new Vite project or reuse the existing one. We're going to create a video.jsx file with a video component in there that you can export. Inside the video component, return a text, not text, I don't know if I have that in there. Return a video component, there's such thing as a text video component, a video element with the src set to a video file that you have locally on your computer. Right. So in this case, I have that right here on my monkey.mp4, and you can grab that from the GitHub repo, or I'll just show you how you can grab one off the internet really quick as well. And you want to make sure that you put that inside your Vite project. I would encourage you to put it in this folder right here, in the assets folder. Okay. We'll take a look at how why that is and how that all works shortly. So grab that MP4 file, whether it's mine that I have in my repo that you can grab and download off GitHub, or just any one off the internet or your computer, and just put it in this assets folder. It doesn't have to be an MP4. I think there's other formats. If you look at the video element on MDN and the supported formats, there should be a whole bunch, but MP4 is probably the most common one. So if you have that, you should be able to find a couple easily online. We'll look at how to actually import it shortly in Vite. But what I want you to do is make it so that this video is going to be a DOM element, right? And we're going to see that video playing, or we should see that showing that video. It's not going to be playing by default. And I want you to make it so that when we move our mouse, right? When I move my mouse over the video element, it starts playing. And then when I move my mouse outside of the video element, it pauses. And if you're doing this like on mobile or something like that, you can probably replace this with like tapping it and then maybe like tapping it again. There's a few other options, like maybe it's out of the viewport or back in the viewport. I would probably suggest just tapping it and tapping it. But if you're on a computer, then just do the kind of when the mouse goes on top of it and then when the mouse leaves that element. And there's a few different DOM events we can use for that, and they all work slightly differently, but they should be good enough for the purposes of this exercise. So check out the video element on MDN if you want kind of a heads up on some formatting and kind of a bit of the different attributes on there, and give that a shot, and then we'll go through it together. All right, so to start, I'll just kind of create a new folder, and I'll say ex1, and in here I'll create a video.jsx. I'll just set this all up. I'll say function video, and I'll say export default video. And in my video component, I'm going to return a video just like that. And it's going to have some src, and I'm going to leave it as blank for now. And I'm going to make sure in my main.jsx, I'm going to import video from video.jsx. I'm going to switch out my video right there. So if I come back in here, we should see nothing but I have my empty video. You can see that it's kind of in the DOM. It just doesn't really have anything in there yet. So that's great. Then I'm going to take this monkey and I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste it into my assets folder. Okay, so there we go. I have my monkey.mp4 file in there. I love monkeys. Monkeys are great. And now let's just kind of look. If you didn't have that file, you want to use your own file, you can probably go to Google. You can look for like free stock MP4 file or video file or something like that. And there's a few different websites you can use. For example, there's like Pexels is pretty good. By the time you watch this video, there might be some other ones. There's like a whole bunch of different ones you can use, Pixabay and things like that. I think I grabbed this one off Pexels. There's a lot that are non-attributable and, or I forget the actual terminology, like copyright and stuff like that. So you just go to like videos, for example, and you can eventually you can search for something and you could like for example like peacock or something like that, and then you can get free peacock videos, very, very pretty animals, and yeah, you could oh, so cute. You could just download that, for example, and save it to your computer. Just grab a small size one. It doesn't have to be gigantic or like super HD or anything. I think the one I have in there is pretty tiny. So go ahead and grab a video that way, or just record your screen or something. But it's more fun to grab something off the internet. Make sure you're careful with the copyrights. If you're going to publish this online somewhere, you want to make sure that their stock copyright licenses are all okay for public use. Okay, so the other thing I want to look up really quick is how to use image source URL in Vite React. That's a long doozy. So I don't know, like that's kind of just how I Google things. You could probably Google something different or copy exactly what I'm Googling, but this is kind of how my brain works, is like I have to kind of spell it out to the computer, like this is exactly what I want in kind of broken English here. And I want to look at Vite.js here, static asset handling. I think that's the one that I want. There's probably some Stack Overflow articles on that as well. Let me zoom in a little bit here. Importing an asset as a URL. So you can basically see that this is exactly what we need to do. We can import image URL from our image. In this case, it's an image, but it should work with a video as well. And we can set the source directly on it. They just did it with JavaScript here, but we should be able to do it with that. So you can read as to kind of how this all works, but basically, like long story short, I guess, is Vite can do some things to optimize this behind the scenes when we ship into production, and to make sure that all of the different URLs in our project, no matter where they're kind of scattered, are resolved correctly when our site gets served. And it kind of creates probably things that probably look something like this with hashes beside them, just so that it can like do things like eliminate older ones and we can get newer ones in there and make sure that everyone has the latest updated images and videos. We'll go over things like that, which again, way beyond the scope of any of this stuff in React. And frankly, not that interesting for what we need to do. But we'll go over that stuff when we create a REST API and backend and server and things like that in future course series. But for now, just kind of realize that we need to grab that URL from that folder like this. So we would import it and then we could set the source. So we'll do that together shortly. Okay, so cool. So let's go ahead and do that. So that's this source right here. So they basically said, okay, like just import it as if it's a file. So let's try that. So I'm going to say import, and I'm going to say monkey image URL, or I'll just say monkey image from, and I'll say /assets, or no, not /, in my case, assets, and then / monkey.mp4. So dot means go up a folder in this case. So since I'm in a folder in EX1, I have to go up a folder into source, and then I have to go down into assets and then into monkey. If you made your file without a folder, then it would just be directly like /assets if it was in the source folder. But dots go up a folder, and / it means the current folder. So hopefully that works. I'm going to put source equals, and this needs to be JavaScript here. So we need to evaluate this because this is a JavaScript variable, just like that. So now this source is set for this video. So if I switch back here, lo and behold, that actually works pretty nicely. We actually have our monkey image. So let me just zoom out a little bit just so we can see that. And there we go. So you can see that there's no like controls, like I'm clicking on it, nothing's happening. If I right click and I show controls, we can see that the controls do show up and it really is an actual video. So we can get that to work by looking at the video tag on MDN. So if I go video MDN, you can see that this has all of the attributes we need in order to get a video working. You can see down here, all the attributes, autoplay, controls, all that kind of stuff. And you can read through that. For now, I'm going to ignore controls. I just want to get it to work with the mouse over effect, but you can add them if you like. And you can just add that controls property right here, or the attribute. All right, now that was a lot of finagling to get things working, but we're in a good place now. So what we want is when the user mouses over this video element, we want it so that it can what's it called? Play the video, right? So how are we going to do that? Let's think for a second. So what I can do, so there are a few different properties I can have on here. I think it's like on mouse enter, on mouse exit, on mouse over, on mouse enter. I'll just go with enter. I think there's like there's a small difference between enter and over and leave and exit and all that kind of stuff. For the purpose of this, it doesn't really matter. On mouse leave, hopefully that kind of makes sense. Enter, leave. And then I think there's like over, exit, something like that. And we're going to call our function. So I'm just going to say enter here, and I'll say leave here. All right. It's going almost off the screen there, but hopefully you can see that. And I'm going to create those functions. So I'm going to say function enter. It's going to do something. And then function exit, and that's also going to do something. Okay. Now, what do we want these to do? So let's think about this. We need this enter function to be able to access this video DOM element and play it. Okay, so let's go back to our video thing here real quick, and let's kind of scroll down, see if it gives us a way to actually play this. Usage. Here you can see that we can add controls like this. We can give different sources and all that kind of fun stuff. Really awesome element. Very powerful. We can add tracks, remove tracks. Pretty cool. Different things about the containers and sources, and they have some really nice examples in here. So I actually want to find the play .play. It should be in here somewhere, shouldn't it? Oh, it's not on here. Events. It's funny how they don't have the play. I guess that's because that's part of the actual DOM API instead. So if I was to go to Google and I would say play video element JavaScript, let's see what we get. Media element.play right here. So we would say the play method attempts to begin playback of the media. It returns a promise which is resolved when the playback successfully started. For failure for any reason, such as permission issues, would result in the promise being rejected. So let's scroll down here. We have our video element. We have a click event listener, and then play video is going to await video elements.play. Okay, cool. So basically, you can see that we have a handle to this video element. Let's scroll up on this a little bit more, or zoom in a little bit more. We have our get elements by ID of video, and then we can use that to .play on it. Okay, so what that tells me is that when I enter onto this video element, I need access to this DOM element so that I can call .play on it. I could use document get element by ID or query selector as we saw, but the React way to do that, as I mentioned, is by doing useRef. So I'm going to import useRef from React, just like that. Import useRef from React. I'm going to say const video ref is equal to useRef. And this I'll start off as null, just so that it's very explicit that I'm starting it that way. And I'm going to add, it doesn't matter where you add this, but I'm going to say ref is equal to video ref. I hope that this reformats all my stuff. There you go. Look at that. So beautiful. Much better. It doesn't run into my face anymore. Oh, I called this leave by accident. You're probably looking at me like, what is this? I think, what did I say? Exit. Enter, leave. confusing myself and everybody around me. Cool. So now I have a reference to this video element in the actual DOM. So check this out. What we can do now is I can just say, okay, when the mouse enters, I'm going to say video ref. And remember, ref has a current property on it. I always mess this up every single time. So if I did .play on this, this would be on the looking for a play method on the actual object reference, but it's on the current property for the DOM node. This is just a React convention that we saw in the video. So leave is going to do the same thing. I think it's pause. Let's go back here. Play video. Oh yeah, they already have it right here. Handle play video element.pause. That sounds right to me. That makes sense. Let's just try it out. We can probably look at the pause API reference right there, but let's just try that out and see if it works. So I'm going to say video ref dot current, and then this time instead of play, I'm going to say pause. Now I know they said promises. I'm just going to ignore promises for now and just assume that this works. I don't really want to check the resolution of these. We're just kind of checking to see if this even works in the first place. So let's see if this works, and then we'll come back and switch it around. So look at that. That's so awesome. So cute. So awesome. So cute. So awesome. Wow. I really love monkeys. They're adorable. So there you go. So mouse enter, mouse leave, mouse enter, mouse leave, mouse enter, mouse leave, mouse enter, mouse leave, right? Pretty cool. You're probably like, oh my gosh, please stop. You're hurting my ears. So that works pretty nicely, right? So the reason why this works is because we have a reference to that DOM node. And since that reference is not necessarily needed to like render this component per se, we just need that DOM node reference to call the play method on it. A ref makes a lot of sense here, and that's like literally like half the reasoning for why ref exists, at least for like in practical purposes, is as a nice DOM node reference like this. Also to store values, which we'll see shortly, but this is a pretty cool use case. So hopefully that one makes sense and is pretty useful, and you had some fun with your different videos or my monkey that I gave you. Cool. Let's take a look at exercise 2 together. All right. Now, this one is a bit of a doozy. So just a bit of a heads up, there's a lot going on with this one. So I want you to really try your best and get as far as you can. And then, see if you can watch the video with me, and I'll probably do some mistakes as well. We'll see. But have fun with it and don't get too frustrated, and know that you can come back and watch this together with me if you get stuck. Now, for this one, again, create a Vite project or Vite project if you want, or just reuse the existing one, which I'll do. We want to create a guess number.jsx element with a guess number component in it. Inside guess number, we're going to have a text input. I should probably make this a number input now that I think about it. Let's see. Let's go text for now. And a button with the text guess inside of it, and then an empty p tag below it. Okay, so this a guess number is a component that's going to have an input, a guess button, and then a empty p tag with no text in it to start. Now, when the component mounts, I'm using specific language and keywords here, so keep that in the back of your mind. When the component mounts, I want you to generate a random integer or whole number between 1 and 10. I just chose 1 and 10 arbitrarily. Feel free to choose a different range or a shorter range. The point of this game is to guess the number, and you're not going to be able to see the number, but you're going to kind of like the high-low game, if you've played that before. And then store this number in a reference and do not render it to the DOM, right? So use a ref to store this number. Don't render the number to the DOM, because the whole point of this game is to guess a hidden number, okay? Again, as I mentioned, the goal of the game is to enter the number in the text box and click guess to guess the secret number. If you guess too high, the p tag should render too high. If you guess too low, it should render too low. And if you guess correctly, it should say that you win. Kind of makes sense, right? So we're going to be trying to guess this hidden number that's being generated behind the scenes when the component mounts between 1 and 10, or whichever range you choose. And you can go too high, too low until you eventually get it, and you have unlimited guesses. We can have different kind of twists on this game, which I have one example below. Now, when you have that working, replace app in the main with your guess number and test that it works in your browser. Here's a nice hint. Console log out your random number, the one that you're putting in the ref, just to make sure that it actually works. Because it would really suck if you had like a decimal number or something and you're off, and it's like you guess 1 and it's like 1.23 or something. That would be pretty much impossible to guess a floating point number. So make sure it's an integer, log it out just so that you can see it in the debug console, and you can kind of maybe switch tabs or something to make sure that you can actually play the game properly once you know that it's actually generating numbers correctly. If you want a bonus, you can make the game automatically restart after a few seconds when you guess correctly with a new random number, for example. You can put some other twists on there and turns. You can have like a limited number of guesses and all that kind of stuff to make it more fun if you want. But this is already quite challenging. So give that your best shot, and then we'll go through a potential solution together. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to do a new folder. I'm going to do ex2. And I'm going to do guess number.jsx. And in here, I'm going to do a function, call this guess number. And in here, I'm going to export default guess number. And in my component, I want to return some JSX, and I'll put some fragments in here. And what I want to return, I think it was an input, right? Type text, I think. And then below that, I said button that said guess. And then below that, I think there was just an empty p tag, just like that. Okay. And I know that I need to do something when guess gets clicked. So I'm just going to do it on click, and I'm just going to call this guess. And I'll just call this, you know what, handle guess. And I'll say handle guess. And I need the function keyword. Or I can make an arrow function, doesn't really matter. Okay, great. Now I'm going to switch to my main.jsx, and I'm going to import that. Ooh, capital import. Guess number from ex2, guess number.jsx, and guess number goes in here. All right, great. There we go. So I'll switch back to Chrome, and there we go. I have my input, and then I have my guess number. And zoom in a bit so we can see that. Now, what do we need to do? So let's kind of do this one step at a time. We need a way to generate a number between 1 and 10 when the component mounts, and then not generate that number again, or at least not until we actually need it for the base non-bonus version. So mount, when I hear mount, I think like useEffect, right? Because if I was to generate a random number, maybe inside here without any kind of effect, like right in here, then that number would get generated every single time this component runs or re-renders, which would probably be bad and never really guess the number properly. So I probably need useEffect. So let me pull that in. So this is useEffect, import useEffect from React. And what I want to do is I want to make a mounting useEffect. And when this component mounts, meaning I have this empty dependency array right here, it says on mount generate random number 1 to 10, 1 to 20, 1 to 10. Let's do 1 to 10. I always forget how to do this. Let me just try my best here. I'll say constant random. Random number is equal to math.floor, because it has to be an integer. Math.random, which is 0 to 1 times 10. And then that gives me like 0 to 9, 0 to 10, plus 1. I don't know. You know what? I'm just going to go with this. Let's just go with this. I always mess this up. Doesn't really, frankly, matter too much. I'm going to log this in the console so I can see it to make sure to actually get the right number. Those of you in the comments can skewer me on generating random numbers with a bound. I always mess that one up. Okay, so let's take a look in Chrome. I'm going to switch over to console, and I get 9. If I reload the page, I should probably get 2 numbers, I think. Yeah, 6 and 7. So this is again because React in dev mode is going to mount and unmount and then remount the component. So we're going to have that useEffect run twice, which most likely means we're going to get 2 random numbers. It could be the same, but most likely different numbers in this case. And the second one is going to be the one that we're going to be stuck with, because that's the one on the remount that gets run. This is only in dev mode. In production mode, we're not going to have to deal with this issue. Okay, so that's our random number. We want to store this somewhere for use. Now, let's think about this, because I need access. So when I click handle guess, I want to check to see if our guess is equal to random number, right? And when I say guess, I mean the value inside of our input. So we need access to random number, but random number is in the scope of this useEffect. So I can't do this check here in this scope of this function. And some of you might be thinking, oh, this is where I should use like var or something like that, right? I don't actually know var would work in this case. var confuses me. You shouldn't use var. It just is really confusing with the scoping issues with var. So we need like a proper way to deal with the scope on this without like guessing as to how the scoping works and thinking too hard about that. So that is where we need useRef, right? Technically, we could have like our random number be out here, right? And we could set that and then we'd have access to it. But that's basically what a ref is. And we should do it the React way, just like I mentioned in the previous example. So I'm going to import useRef. And I'm going to say const random number is equal to useRef. And it's going to start at null. And when it mounts, we're going to say random number dot current, because remember that there's always a current property on this. This is an object now. This is no longer just a number. I could use a different property. I'll just use current because that's the convention. And that's going to equal to that random number. And if I log out random number now, which is an object, let's see what we get. So I'll save that and I'll reload the page. And you can see that we indeed get our current property of 0. In this case, I reload the page. I'll get 2 more random numbers inside that current property. Okay, so this is now inside our random number object, and to access it is random number.current. Okay, so handle guess now. We need a way to access whatever is inside this input element, but when we click the button. So now we're running the same situation as we did in the warm-up, right? We need access to another DOM element from this DOM element's event. So probably another ref would be useful. So let me do that. So I'm going to say const input ref is equal to useRef, and this is totally fine. We can have multiple refs or multiple states inside our component, and that's totally fine. In this input here, I'll just say ref is equal to input ref, and now I have a handle to this DOM node as an actual DOM reference anywhere in my component through my input ref.current property. Okay. Now we can check in here to see if they're equal. So I'll say if my input ref dot current is equal to our random number dot current, and this looks kind of ugly, but that is kind of what we want. Console.log, you win, right? If it's equal, then we win. Let's see if this works, right? So remember, these are objects. We have to grab the current property. So I said it's a little bit ugly. I'm not really happy with this. I probably want to destructure that out or something. We could probably do that if you like in a second. Let me switch back though and test it if this works. So current is 6. I'm going to enter 4 and press guess. Nothing happens. If I enter 6 and I press guess, okay, nothing happens. So something weird is happening here. Let me put some logging in here. I'll do a console.log of my input ref.current. Because I need .value. That's what I see the issue is. Input ref, this is why it gets really confusing with DOM nodes. Input ref.current.value, because this is the DOM node, is like target.value kind of thing. Because this current is the DOM node for the input. I have to get the value property out of it. Otherwise, I'm just checking the DOM node is equal to this number, which is not what I want. So before I log that out, let me just check to see if this is right. I'll switch this over. 9. I'm going to enter 9 here. Guess. Still doesn't work. So let's log that out. So I'll say input ref dot current, and I'll say random number dot current. And I'll actually put .value on here. Why not? Switch this over, and I'll put a 1 in here, and we get a 1 and we get a 3. Okay, so if I get a 3 in here, guess. So this is the problem, I guess, with why I said this is should be a number node. Probably, I think that changes it to a number in JavaScript by default. I actually can't remember, to be honest. So we did have it correct. It was just that this is a text and this is a number, or a string and a number. So what we probably want to do is change this to be a number here. Right, so I'm going to wrap this in a number. That's one way to do it. There's a few ways to do this kind of stuff. Let's see if that works. And now it's getting really ugly. So let's see what happens here. 2, if I press 2, you win. Okay, if I press 1, nothing should happen. Great. Okay, so that actually works. So let's kind of refactor this a little bit, because I'm really not a fan of all this craziness over here. So I'll just say like const, and I'll do, let me destructure this out of input ref. input ref dot current, and I can grab the value out of that, and I'll call this one my, or I'll say input guess. So I'll explain this code in a second, and I'll say const, and I'll just say current is equal to, I'll just say random, because I already have random number. That's not a really great name, but I'll go with that, is equal to random number. Okay. Yeah, or I could just rename this. I could say, you know what, I'll just say const random is equal to random number.current, just so that we have the same structure here, so it's not too confusing. Now, what this is doing here is this is destructuring. If you've never seen this before, I have a video on the channel for JavaScript in depth where we go over destructuring in depth, both for objects, which is what we're doing in this case, and for arrays. But we're saying here that, hey, JavaScript, there's input ref.current is like an object. In this case, is actually a DOM node, which is like an object. And I want you to grab the value property off of that directly and put it in this value variable. But actually, I want you to rename that to input guess. This is just a nice short convention of renaming it all in one line here. So I'm saying grab value from input ref.current, which is a DOM node, which is what we're doing right here, but then rename it to input guess. Okay, so, and then for this one, I'm just renaming random.current to be random, so I don't have to type random.current every single time. Okay, so I'll just get rid of this console log here, and now what I can do is number of what is it? Input guess is equal to random. Now I could probably go a bit further with this and turn this into a number. You know, like, is that useful? So for example, I can say like let, and then I can say input guess is equal to number of input guess, kind of like that, right? And I can get rid of input guess like this, so I don't have to keep typing number, input guess, number, input guess. It's really up to you, right? If you find this really confusing, you can do it the long way for every single if statement. That's totally fine as well. What you'll find though is that you really want to start saving keystrokes as you get more comfortable with this kind of destructuring. So I'll just leave it like this just so you can get a bit of practice with that. Hopefully that works. Let me just test if this works before I actually, hope I don't bite my tongue here by giving you the wrong information. So 8, I win, 9, I should get nothing. Great. So it still works. So, cool. So now what we need is else if input guess. So if the input guess is less than the random number, then we want to console.log you guessed too low. Probably should capitals in this. Else, so if it's neither equal and it's not less than, then it must be greater than. So I'll do console.log of you guessed too high. Okay, there we go. So let's see if this actually works. So I'm going to refresh the page here. I have 2 because of the re-render here. So I'll guess 0, guess too low. Okay, I'll guess 4, too high, 1, too low, 3, too high, 2, and I win. Great. So that actually works. Now the only thing is that the user needs to have the console open, which is not ideal. So we said we want to replace the text in this paragraph with this text that we just console logged out. So again, this comes back to like, what do we need to do? I need to put some text inside this paragraph tag, which is in the DOM, and I want to update that text like wherever I want in my functions. And every time I update it, I want this to update in the DOM. I want the DOM to refresh or re-render. So whenever we need that, we need a use state, right? So I'm going to create a use state, and I'm going to import that now. You can see why this looks a bit more complicated, and there's many ways to do this, but this is one way that is probably, I think, the more obvious way, hopefully. Maybe I'm just losing it a little bit. Use state of what do we want this one to be? We will just start this as an empty string. And this is going to be the p text. This is a set, you can call this whatever you like, p text. And I'm going to put this p text inside of this paragraph right here. So now I have a way to actually render some text to this p tag every single time. So now instead of only console logging this out, I can actually set p text to be this value, right? And if I copy this a whole bunch of times, I can do that, and I can do you win gets changed here to too low, and you win down here is the too high case. So I'll leave the console in there just for fun, so you can see kind of the corollary between these two, right? So this is actually setting that state, which is this state right here, which is going to cause the p tag to re-render to that value. So let's see if that works. So I'll refresh, and I'll guess. So the number is 4. I'm cheating a little bit. I'll guess 2. Okay, you guess too low, so that's nice. I'll guess 6. You guess too high, and then I'll guess 4, and then you win. Perfect. So there we go. So that works quite nicely. So yeah, that's pretty much it, right? The hardest part of this is really how to tie all these different things together and when you need which of these and where they actually go. If you actually think about it, this is quite a bit of code for what looks like a relatively simple case, right? All we're doing is generating a number and hiding it from the user and then showing them if they're getting it right or wrong, up or down. But if you can understand this code, you're pretty much set. Like, this is really a good example of something you will just see pretty much everywhere in a lot of different components. Not obviously a random number generator like this where you're just guessing random numbers, but something along these lines where we're mixing and matching these use effects, use refs, and use states like this. So hopefully you can understand the difference between these 3 hooks in this particular example and what each of them is actually doing. Okay, let's go over to our last exercise for this video, exercise number 3. We came a long way. All right. Phew. So this one I'm really excited for because I finally wanted to show how forms work in a really nice, concise way. Because what I saw a lot of the time is when you first learn React, forms are one of those kind of sticking points. What I'll probably do is another video, maybe at some point, either in this series or in the future or an advanced set of videos where we cover like data validation and handling for React. But this is going to get you kind of pretty much most of the way for most forms that you're going to be needing, regardless of kind of the type of the form. What you'll normally see is use state being used for forms, and I'll show you how we could do this without that. So it's pretty awesome. So create a new Vite project for this, or use the existing one. Create a form.jsx file with a form component in it that you can export. And then inside form, I want you to return a form, as we've been mentioning. And in that form, I want you to have a text input for a name, an email input for an email, and then a number input for an age. So the user is going to enter these 3 values, their name, their email, and their age. And then there's going to be a button that's type submit with the text submit in it right below all these, so they can click that submit button to submit the form as if this was like an internet form somewhere on our website, like a contact form, for example, right? Then we want to add an empty p tag below the form just so that we can use it later on. Now, the goal of this exercise is to find a way to use the useRef hook such that when you submit the form, we display the form's content in the p tag below the form that we just created, right? That p tag right here that I mentioned. You can format this in any way that you want, like JSON or a nice little string, whatever you want, doesn't matter. Just have these values clearly readable by a user as soon as they click that submit button to show up in this p tag. So you gotta also be careful because forms by default reload the page. You're gonna want to prevent a default there. And we wanna make it so that we can see this name, email, and age show up in this p tag right below the form when we click the submit button. Okay, and I'm gonna give you a hint for this one because there's quite a lot going on and this might not immediately be obvious how you can do this without use state. You can check out the FormData Web API on MDN as to some examples of how this might work. So give that a shot and we will go through it together. All right, so I'm going to create a new folder here. I'll call this ex3, and in my ex3, I'm going to create a new file. I'll call this form.jsx, and I'll do function form, and I guess I'll do the export. I always forget the export, so I'll put the export in here, default form. And I'm going to return the, I'm going to return a fragment. My brain froze for a second. And I'm going to do a form. And I don't really need an action for now. But I do need my input element. So I'm going to do input type text. I'm going to give this a name property, and you'll see why in a second. And generally you should have a name property. You can give these labels if you want as well. Feel free to do that. I'm just going to go the quicker route and just do it without labels. Maybe I'll do a placeholder. I'll just say name. This is going to be name. And I'll say, placeholder is name. Sure. Let's go with that. And then I'll say input type is email. Name is email. And then placeholder is also email. Okay, and then one more input, and this is going to be type number. And name is going to be H, and placeholder is going to be H. Or actually, I guess if it's type number, we can't have, I don't know, I'll say 20 as a placeholder, for example. And this is going to be AB, or I'll say monkey, or yeah, abc at 123.com. Because that makes more sense as an email placeholder. All right, so then we have our p tag below that with some empty text in it, which will actually populate with the data in that form once we have this working. Then I'm going to make sure that I import this form into my main. So let me do that right away. So I'm going to say import form from ex3 form.jsx. Form right there, and I'll save that. I'll switch over to my Chrome, and there we go. Look at those nice placeholders, and I can enter all these values. So that's pretty nice. Okay, so we saw a little bit of the FormData API in the DOM series, so I might pull up the documentation, but let's see how far we can get without it, because I want to show you some pretty cool stuff. So what you will see a lot of the time in React projects is that when you have something like this, a lot of people will use useState in various ways. So for example, I could create 3 different states, one for the name, one for the email, and then one for the age, right? And every single time the user changes or like mouse down or on input or something like that, on these inputs, I would update that state. So however many inputs that I have or form elements that I would have that many states. Now that can get quite unwieldy, as you can imagine, because some forms are very, very long. Like if we filled out like different like government forms online, or like, like a banking form or something, for example, or like a survey, some of those feel like you're gonna, you can take a nap and then come back and fill out the rest of the form kind of thing, right? So we probably will get, pull our hair out if we have too many states all over the place. And that's going to cause a lot of re-renders, and it just kind of gets pretty messy very quickly. So what a lot of people then do is they'll create one state and they'll create an object, right? And then in that object, they'll have the keys to match these different values. So they'll have kind of like a set state for the name, a set state for the email, and then the age, and it's only changing one state, but you still have to kind of do the set state for each of these, and it's still going to do the whole re-render and all that kind of stuff. So you could also do this technically with a ref and not cause re-renders if you don't need it, but then you run into some other issues. Although we're going to use a ref, but in a slightly different way. And it turns out, that forms are so common, and this was used way back in the day, that there's actually a way to do this with just the DOM APIs. And this is why knowing some of the DOM APIs is so useful for learning even higher level concepts like React in this case. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to create a ref. So I'm going to say import useRef from React. And I'm going to say const formRef is equal to useRef. And this is going to start as null. So I'm going to use this form ref as a reference to this form. You say ref equals to form ref. And I also need an on submit. I think I forgot that button. So let me add that here. So let me say button, and I'll say submit. And I'll say type equals submit. Hopefully you caught that before I did. Type submit. Okay. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so I haven't put this in here yet. So let me call submit submit form, I guess. Let's just call it that. And I'll create a function here. I'll call this function submit form. And what you could do is technically you could probably grab the event and do this without a ref, but I'm going to show you again the React way to do this, which is pretty much the same thing. We can actually grab this form reference and deal with all the form stuff directly from that without any state or without anything else. And it automatically creates the object for us and sorts it all out. And we have access to just everything, which is really nice. And if we had subforms and all that kind of stuff, it would all still work just fine. So let me actually grab this event because I know that I need to prevent the default for this form, because if I don't, it's actually going to reload the page. So actually, you know what? Let me show you what I mean. If I switch back to Chrome and I don't do the prevent default and I reload this page, what we'll see is I can enter some stuff in here and I click submit and the page is going to refresh. I'm going to lose all my data. Once I validate my email, there we go, submit, and all of it's gone, right? The page reloaded and all my stuff disappeared and my console refreshed as well. So we don't want that. So we're going to prevent that default. So we're going to say e.prevent default to prevent that page load from that event that we do get passed to us as the event handler for onSubmit. But we don't really need the event beyond that. Technically, we can grab the form element from that, but I'm going to use this ref. So check this out. I can say const form data is equal to a new form data object, and I'm going to pass this form data element, form data constructor, sorry, my HTML form element. I'm just going to pass it in, like literally the DOM node, right? And the DOM node is inside form ref.current, because the current property is going to refer to this by default ref. Okay. And now this form data has everything inside of it that we need. So let me show you in the console really quick. we have to loop over this. So since it's an iterator, so I'll say for const, I'll say key value for now of form data, console.log key and the value. I'm just doing a destructuring here. I could probably have just done it as one object, but I'll show you them as separate objects. So in here, I can put monkey, I can put something at something.com, and I can put I'm 2 years old, and I'll submit. And here you can see logged in the console the key for that input element, which is coming from the name property, right? This name property right here, email age. So we're getting name, email, age, and then the actual value that we entered for that property, right? Monkey, my email, and then 2. Isn't that totally awesome, right? We have the entire form, and someone can add more elements to this form. We don't have to do anything. The whole thing just gets transformed in this object by the Form API for us, and there's many nice methods in there that we can use that I encourage you to look up on MDN. All right, so we can now grab these values and put them into our paragraph. So again, just like we saw with our previous exercise, I want to put stuff in here dynamically and tell it to re-render and put that stuff in there with new text when I want it to. So that means I probably need useState this time. So I'm going to say const, I'll say ptext again, set ptext, and this is going to equal to useState, and I'll start it as just an empty string. And here what I'll do is I'll create a I'll just call it paratext equal empty string to start. And what I'll say is I'm going to say every time I loop through this, I'm going to say paratext plus equals. I'm going to concatenate to it my key and value. So I'll be fancy here. I'll just use some nice formatting. I'll say, I'll probably rename this so it's more obvious. Name and then a value. So I want to put the name here, and then I want to put the value here, and I'm going to surround this in a template string, just like that. Okay, and once I have that paratext built up, I can set ptext to be that paratext. So I'm going to build up a string. I'm going to set the state this is going to set this state, which is going to down here. Finally, I'm going to insert it, which is going to be the p text, and it's going to re-render to be that text. And this is all coming from really this heavy lifter right here that is turning into the form data object, so I can actually grab stuff out of it like this and many other really cool features. So I'm going to switch back here. Let me reload the page, and I'll say my name is Mr. Monkey, and my email is monkey@trees.com, and I am 5 years old, and I'm going to click submit and take a look at that. We have name, Mr. Monkey. We have email, it's a bit of formatting weirdness here, monkey@trees.com. And then we have my age of 5. Nothing reloaded. I should probably clear these texts after. I'll leave that as an exercise for you if you like. But we did that in a previous video before. And there are many, many ways to do this. And I'll give you a chance to try that out. But most importantly, we have all of the forms values here, and we can actually send this stuff off, for example, to our backend, to our API to actually do work with this as if it was like a fetch request, for example, and we could turn into JSON and all that kind of fun stuff. So really, really handy. It's almost like unbelievable how just with this like ref, and technically we can get away with it without the ref if we can just use the events, but I would encourage you to use the ref. Like this use state is just so we can visualize it. We don't even need that. We could do everything with this useRef and just grab the form data straight out of that and handle all of it as we need it. So that is pretty cool. I encourage you to check out the FormData API. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. I might make a video on that in the future for some of the more advanced features, but this is definitely one of the easier ways and kind of more less error prone ways to actually deal with forms in React. So that wraps up the exercises. I know this was a long one as usual, but I really want to make sure we go through as many of these as possible to give you a practical application for most of these. I hope you found this video and set of exercises valuable. If you did, I'd love it if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. I also have a Patreon set up if you want to like help with the channel out there, or on YouTube memberships or super thanks if you like. But in the next set of videos, what we're going to go over are some other hooks. Again, surprise, surprise, that I've been super excited for and I can't wait, which are the first, the use reducer hook, followed by the use context hook. And those are kind of scary sounding hooks for a lot of people when they first start, because they're a little bit like less used and a bit trickier to set up, and a lot going on with them. But now that we understand these basic hooks, in fact, those hooks are just going to build on top of these ideas and make some things a lot easier. And we'll be able to see how, just similar to how useRef is not really too different from useState, we can do a lot of really cool things with these new hooks once we learn them. So until that video for use reducer, I will see you later.